my understanding from what I read in the press is that on the territorial issue, both sides seem to agree that there won't be an actual formal peace agreement in which the boundaries, in which we recognize a change in the boundaries of Ukraine. In other words, there would just be sort of a de facto recognition that the Russians are in control in this area, but we wouldn't legally recognize those areas as part of Russia. It would be, a little bit like deciding what the boundary is between North Korea and South Korea. Well, we don't know, but the war ended here. The Korean War ended here in the 1950s, and this is the line that the troops were at. This is the armistice line, and we're just going to treat that as a de facto line without necessarily concluding a legal agreement of a change in boundaries. And so I'm sure the Ukrainians are hoping that even if they have to cede, even if they have to acknowledge that the Russians will have de facto control over these regions in the Donetsk, in the Donbass, in eastern Ukraine, I'm sure that the Ukrainians are thinking that a day will come when this will be undone and this will be reversed. And this is not a preposterous idea. I served, as you mentioned, as a lawyer in the State Department. The United States never recognized, as a legal matter, the annexation of the Baltic states by the Soviet Union. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, were annexed by the Soviet Union after World War II. And the United States said, no, you acquired those territories by force. We don't recognize that. Now, in fact, the Soviets were in control, right, in Lithuania, in Latvia, in Estonia. But this long-running belief that those countries were not really part of the Soviet Union lingered. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, the independence of the Balts was restored. And so I'm sure that this is the model, or I imagine that this is the model that the Ukrainians have in mind, is look, we'll agree for right now that the Russians control this territory. We don't agree that these territories are actually legally part of Russia. And we hope that there's a day in the future, which is presumably a day after Vladimir Putin is no longer the leader of Russia, that the status of those territories can be reconsidered.
That was a lot. I just have a question on that. Wouldn't that kind of make the peace deal, I guess, for lack of a better term, tainted in a way? Almost we're accepting that this is not something that is done, but we're going to allow it to be done until we see an issue with it later. But we don't know when later is.
I share your view. I have been, the original position of the Biden administration was that no change in Ukraine's borders by force could be permitted, and that was the view of our European allies. So I think this administration, the Trump administration, has been much more sympathetic to kind of Russia's demands